This is amazing. I mean, I thought, oh, words, bookstore, we might have maybe 5 or 7 people, but look at everybody who's showed up, and I just love this. Unfortunately, what I have to share with all of you is quite a bit of heavy stuff. Because I really believe in order to understand and appreciate socialism, we have to understand the ways in which capitalism has failed. So we have to understand what is capitalism and why it has not been able to provide the kind of social justice that we had hoped it would be able to. Or at least somebody hoped. Somebody hoped. So I really have divided my presentation into 3 parts. First, I'm going to talk about, what is the theoretical premise of capitalism, which makes it what it is. And the second point, that why capitalism is not able to provide social justice. So we can, go all crazy about it. Oh, capitalism is not doing this, it's not doing that. Listen, it was not even supposed to do it. So how can we even expect it to do something which it hadn't started out to do in the first place? And then if capitalism is not for our future, for my grandson's future, definitely not, then what is the alternative? And of course, Derek would like me to talk about the Knox-Shelbury movement, and I was very active in it. I was actually underground for almost half a year, and it's amazing that I'm alive, but that's almost 50 years ago. But the Knox-Shelbury movement, I sort of have distanced myself from it, not because of its ideological focus. I'm a proud Marxist. But what I don't like is how violent it became. And so when a movement becomes violence, random people fall victims to it. And that's not the way to do it. That's not the way you bring a movement together. So hopefully I'll be able to lay some of the foundations of socialism which we see expressed in the cooperative movement. That is what my focus is. I'm sorry the Democratic National Committee did not consult us before they decided to put the debate for tonight, but I'm sure we'll be done before that, because I know all of you are biting your nails to make sure.
Number 1 on the list.
Okay, here I go, and I have to read it to make sure that I have everything that I want to say. This is not the world we ever envisioned leaving our progeny, our children and grandchildren. Every which way look, there is decay and ruin. Tenets of civility and morality that we considered given and uncontestable are being tossed aside, trampled on. We look around with utter disbelief, as even the lowest measures of decorum and decency vanish from spaces which up until very recent times were considered the very repositories of the very best. The gap between the rich and the poor is unprecedented and historic. The dwindling middle class is dismayed not only at the corrosion of their standard of living, but also at the ever-growing uncertainties and anxieties of their futures and their children's, and the growing menace and the existential crisis which faces our earth and all its creatures on land and in water, and the growing menace of racism, nativism, xenophobia, and general intolerance, which is poisoning our body politic. We shake our heads in shock and disbelief and wonder how we even got here. Because when we were growing up, we envisioned a very different world, a better world. One thing I want to say most forcefully right at the outset, that what we see happening in the US and the world around is without doubt the end product of the scams of an emboldened, arrogant, conceited capitalist class. billionaires and millionaires, just a handful of individuals, along with their cronies in government, in the media, and in the culture industry, for whom humanity, morality, civility, basic decency, honesty have all been dispensed of for the crass advantage of limitless monetary gain. Therefore, in the absence of all those values, which make people think twice before knowingly endangering the health and well-being of their fellow human beings and the future generations, they feel no compunction at all to desecrate with utter impunity the social compact. The social compact, the understanding between people and their government, which has been built brick by brick through the sacrifice, social activism, social movements, and foresight of generations of people and their visionary leaders, from Voting Rights Act to the APA, from food stamps to Roe v. Wade, all cast aside, replaced only with the tools to divide and conquer, scapegoating the immigrant, insulting communities of color and their leaders, indoctrinating with their poison-filled messages those made vulnerable and often losers by their very own policies in Appalachia, in rural America, while they continue to plunder the commonwealth of people in every imaginable form. But today, all of our lives are entangled in the cross currents of this very system. In the United States, and more in the rest of the world, the system we depend on to fulfill our survival needs is the system called capitalism, and those entities within it which provide us with a means of livelihood. Of course, meeting some needs has also been the function of the public sphere, the government, but we live at a time when the government's role is being whittled down, so that more and more we are completely dependent on the forces of the market. To meet all our needs, we work for corporations, banks, factories, retail stores, tech companies, hospitals, nursing homes, restaurants, landscaping, and housekeeping outfits, and all such what are called income-producing entities. Being under the umbrella of the capitalist system means that all these agencies function in terms of the rationale integral to the capitalist system. The primary rationale that guides capitalism is its all-encompassing need to continuously maximize profit and accumulate more and more capital. Let us be very clear. The aim of the capitalist is not to provide commodities or services to sustain your lives or the lives of your communities or that of the environment. It does not produce things because people need them, but because they can make more and more money by selling those products. To the capitalist, a commodity or service is important only because it earns a profit, not because of its intrinsic value or lack of it. And capitalism is fundamentally drawn to produce only those things which ensures immediate return, profit. If no profit and immediate return is guaranteed, regardless of how important that product or service might be for the well-being of the community, it is not produced. They have no interest in it. Even Adam Smith, the father of capitalism, who they talk about all the time to support all the nonsense that they do. Even Adam Smith recognized this, and on page 62 of The Wealth of Nations, this is what he writes. Bear with me. The sovereign, meaning government, has the duty of erecting and maintaining public services, public works and certain public institutions, which can never be for the interest of any individual to erect and maintain, because the profit could never repay the expense to any individual, though it may frequently do much more than repay it to the greater society. So even he recognized that there were certain imperatives in society, things which everyone in society absolutely needs, such as free healthcare, free education, roads and mass transit, and which private investment was not fulfilling, which private investment was not capable of fulfilling, since no profit would be forthcoming, such as those enterprises which might fall under the purview of the Green New Deal. But it is the duty of the government, of the sovereign, to take up such initiatives for the greater good. Even Adam Smith recognized this. In our world today, the power of capitalism is uncontested. Governments and people who work for them don't want to cross them in any way. Why? Because the capitalist owns the means of production that gives them enormous power. The workers who work at the different facilities do not own the machines, tools, technology, or resources as they go about producing goods and services. The machinist at GM does not own the machines used to make a car. The worker at McDonald's does not own the fryers, the grill, and the ovens. The nurse does not own any of the healthcare tools, etc. You get the picture. Owning the means of production gives the capitalist enormous power. Ownership of capital, land, factories, technology, all of which confers unique privileges, which allows the owner to control capital in a way that delivers maximum returns. Bye, Sigurd.
Running the capital.
I know you. I'll disown it. So owning the means of production confers unique privileges, which allows the owner to control capital in ways that deliver maximum returns. They can manage their sources of income to maximize their benefits in which their employees cannot. And very often the economic destinies of others are impacted by those decisions. So a factory owner, as you know, can move their factory to a region where wages are low, government regulations are lax, and displace the workers who might have worked there for generations. Yet they have no control over the circumstances of their employment. Just recently, AT&T outsourced 3,000 of its IT support jobs, causing incredible uncertainty in the lives of people who have worked for AT&T for decades. Owners have the prerogative to decide how and when technology can replace workers. Next to global outsourcing of jobs, automation, mechanization, and other such labor-saving devices has led to reduced need for workers, which is very convenient and wonderful. But when people need jobs, eliminating jobs is a total disservice to society. But in order to remain competitive, capitalists must revolutionize the instruments of their production. But in the process, it's the workers who are made redundant. On a daily basis, the circumstances of work, wages, benefits, work schedules, vacations, all of which determines the quality of workers' lives, is not in their control. Each of these is configured by the employer in terms of what is the most cost-effective and deliver the most return. But in the process, the workers and their families, and ultimately society suffers. This is immensely ironic, since it is the worker who ultimately is the one who produces the wealth of societies. Let's consider this for a moment. The capitalist alone cannot produce commodities and services on a scale in order to earn revenue. Workers are needed to do that. The owner may have all the technology, all the machinery, all the tools, but without workers, nothing will be produced. It is the worker who brings together all the factors of production and crystallizes it into a product or service which the capitalist then sells and makes a profit. And for the work performed, the worker gets a salary, and which he uses to pay for food, rent, mortgage, and all of that. The cost of labor is the most expensive item in the capitalist's cost of production, because wages and salaries have to be paid every month, every week. But capitalism needs workers to produce goods and services, but profit cannot be maximized if workers are paid in terms equivalent to the total value that they produce. So in setting up and running a business, the capitalist always tries to push the labor cost as low as possible. Slavery is the most efficient system for maximizing profit. And in the absence of slavery, driving down wages as much as possible is essential to maintain a high rate of profit. Could you hand that out? In my neighborhood McDonald's, there are 7 employees. The average wage is $8.24 an hour. In the 16-hour period, the workers collectively made $923.36, or $57.71 an hour. Okay? In the same period, they made and sold $5,000 and $391.87 worth of food, or $336.99 per hour. In other words, each hour they worked, they collectively produced value worth $279.28 more than their wages. So to earn their $57.71, when they are producing $336 in value, they really just need to work 10 minutes and 27 seconds. That's all they need to work to produce the value which is equivalent to the wages they make. However, they can't just do that because they have signed the contract to work for the entire hour, for the entire 8 hours. So the rest of the time, the 49 minutes and 73 seconds, they are not working for themselves, they are working for free. They're not working for themselves. This is the surplus value which creates the profit for the unremunerated labor, which makes the profit for the capitalist. And this is the process of extraction which you find everywhere in the capitalist economy, whether you're working in a factory or a nursing home or a restaurant or a landscaping outfit. The worker is the most vital player. Yet, when a vast part of his or her labor remains unpaid and unremunerated, and the lion's share is appropriated by the capitalist, it leads to impoverishment. It leads to inequality in society. So there is nothing mysterious about why there is inequality in a capitalist society, because the capitalist system organically, naturally, just doing what it has to do to maximize profit, creates inequality. And since all it cares about is making profit in any which manner or form, without any regard to quality, intrinsic value, or consequence, it ensnares all of humanity in its allure of junk. Food, clothes, all manner of stuff, drugs, phones, all sorts of things made cheap and disposable by externalizing the real cost, by not paying workers, and by trashing the environment. All because maximizing profit in any manner is capitalism's existential imperative, and because it also controls the means of mental production through the control of ideas, ideologies, news, information, fake news, Fox News. Everywhere people turn, they are inundated with the same message, which they internalize, often subconsciously, which compels them to support and reinforce the power of the capitalist system. People absorb the rationale of the system and make it their own, losing their own power to rationalize, to think it through, to challenge it, becoming accomplices in their own exploitation and alienation. All the exclusionary ideologies, racism, nativism, and you know all of that, they further reinforce and strengthen the all-pervading class inequalities that we see in society. You know, capitalism was the handmaiden in the birth of racism. Capitalism, the same forces that created capitalism also created racism. We can talk about that some other time. But I did want to bring it up, that they're intricately connected. They're completely connected, complicit in what each does. Capitalism cannot provide social justice. It is impossible for it to be anything but cutthroat. It is not in the business of providing economic democracy, not because it has failed to do so, but simply because it cannot do so if it must fulfill its existential purpose to maximize profit. Today we live in a world where all the progressive changes of the past, talk about the New Deal, talk about the GI Bill, which is the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, which was so socialist in terms of the kind of services it provided. But bit by bit, all of these things have been done away with, corroded, ever since the fall of the, okay, let me read this. Today we live in a world where all the progressive changes of the recent past are being contested and turned upside down. From income transfer programs to the guards against further environmental damage. Ever since the fall of the Berlin Wall, when with the unraveling of the Soviet Union, capitalism was declared the undisputed victor and globalization gained speed, the worldwide spread of capitalism had a new ideological boost in the form of neoliberalism, or also referred to as the Washington Consensus. The most important tenet of neoliberalism is the emphasis on free markets. The idea that market forces should determine the course of the economy and consequently what happens to people's lives. This implies that government should do nothing to regulate the market or protect the people. It should not fix a minimum wage, should not have work safety standards or environmental regulations. Government should minimize its role by eliminating subsidies and transfer programs like SNAP, TANF, Medicaid, Head Start, and you saw what's happening with food stamps just recently. And ideally, privatize state-run programs such as Social Security, public schools, and VA. Make government so small that it can be flushed down the toilet, as one protagonist famously quipped. However, when it comes to bailing out Wall Street, it's a different matter altogether. And this is the context in which Bernie Sanders talks about socialism for the rich, socialism for Wall Street, socialism for the affluent. Then they don't seem to have too much trouble taking any monies from the government, which is your money and my money. It's a hard-earned money of society. That's when they don't seem to have a problem. So I think we can say government's role, as long as it can make the profit motive even more virile, for those at the top, to make the market friendly for those at the top, but with no concern whatsoever for everybody else who comes. The world we live in today, and the rest of the world, is the handiwork of neoliberalism, with the ever-dwindling prospect that social and environmental justice can ever be achieved in a capitalist system. In 1916, as Europe was in the throes of the First World War, Rosa Luxemburg, the Marxist revolutionary socialist from Poland and then Germany, this is what she wrote, and I quote, as things stand today, capitalist civilization cannot continue. We must either move forward into socialism or fall back into barbarism, end of quote. Given everything that we see happening on a daily basis today, won't you say we already are in the deep muck of barbarism? How much worse can it get? So the time for socialism is long past. It's overdue. So what is socialism? Well, the simple vision of socialism is the powerful desire to end misery and oppression, enable each person to be the best they can be by fulfilling their truest potential, end the alienation of individuals from each other, and pave the path towards fostering community and creativity that all humans crave. The first step being to ensure that each human is assured of those commodities, services, and circumstances which they absolutely need to survive and live fully. The right to receive which is not conditional, but assured simply because each is a member of society. The industrial and technological capability for unlimited advancement that is produced under capitalism through the collective labor of society, now liberated from private ownership of capital and the private appropriation of profit, can be harnessed with due regard for justice and fairness, to provide everyone with the opportunity to live with security and dignity. And people can finally receive the full value of what they produce. Under socialism, things we all need and use is socially guided. Under socialism, things we all need and use is socially owned cooperatively, and decisions about resources are made democratically, all guided by the underlying belief that when people's existential, their survival needs are taken care of, they don't fall prey to ideologies which divide. They have the opportunity to finally recognize their shared humanity and are able to foster feelings of generosity and empathy. But here's the million-dollar question. How do we get to this idyllic state? In trying to answer this question, I would like to make a distinction between democratic socialism and revolutionary or real socialism. The latter latter, revolutionary or real socialism, advocates the complete restructuring of society and taking away the source of the capitalists' power, which is the private ownership of capital, private ownership of property. As private property is abolished, things we all need and use is socially owned, cooperatively. All decisions about resource allocation and use is made democratically, guided by the motto that what touches all is decided by all, with utmost priority given to human needs, values, and protecting the environment instead of the primacy of profit. Only a social and political revolution can bring about this form of socialism. Are we ready for that?
Yes, do.
Democratic socialists, most famously Senator Bernie Sanders, are inspired by, and I quote, deep and abiding faith in the American people to peacefully and democratically enact the transformative change that will create shared prosperity, social equality, and true freedom for all. End of quote. When Senator Sanders talks about democratic socialism, he talks about an agenda of reform to take the unfinished business of FDR's New Deal and the Bill of Economic Rights and carrying them out to completion. And in keeping with that position, he is proposing a 21st century Bill of Economic Rights, which establishes, these are his words, once and for all, that every American, regardless of income, is entitled to the right to a decent job that pays a living wage, the right to quality health care, the right to a complete education, the right to affordable housing, the right to a clean environment, the right to a secure retirement. Senator Sanders' sincere advocacy for Medicare for all, under the premise that health care is a human right, and individuals should have access to it freely, unconditionally, is one that is integral to his position for all these other initiatives on which his vision for a democratic socialist United States is based. And it is his principal support for democratic socialism that is raising the indignation of both Republicans and his fellow Democrats, who recognize the fundamental truth of his message and the popularity of his ideas with an increasing number of Americans, especially young ones, who have everything to lose if this status quo continues. Where will President Bernie Sanders find the money to put his ideas into action? A question which is brought up ad nauseum in the context of his plan for Medicare for all. According to the economists Thomas Piketty and Emmanuel Saez, even a modest increase in the total tax rate on the top 1% would bring an additional $275 billion in revenue. That's far more than just the $47 billion needed to make all public colleges and universities tuition-free. Such an increase goes a long way in generating the revenue needed to finance Medicare for all, increasing Social Security benefits, and rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. Redistributive taxation is a step in the right direction. Well, as we have found, is socially created. Redistribution allows people to enjoy the fruits of their own labor. I support Senator Sanders' take on democratic socialism, even as I realize that as long as the fundamental structure of capitalist economy remains unchanged, government action will always benefit capitalist interests at the expense of everything else, regardless of sympathetic politicians legislating their way toward socialism. Is it really possible to reform capitalism without subverting the power of privately owned capital? Can you transform a man-eating tiger into a vegetarian, as I read somewhere? Can the system, in fact, be made kinder and gentler without changing the structural features of capitalism, private ownership, and private profit? You know, in the 1950s and 60s, many elements of social democracy were enshrined in the New Deal, and as I just said, the Servicemen's Readjustment Act, at least for white workers. But starting with Ronald Reagan's presidency, and as deindustrialization, globalization, and the assault on unions and collective bargaining brought the working class to its knees, the erosion of the social safety net began in earnest. Even as worker productivity increased, wealth became more and more concentrated in the hands of the 1%. And the government's role in leveling the playing field was continuously erased. As long as the structural features of capitalism remain, attaining a robust welfare state is at best temporary and dismantled as soon as the other side has more power. Economic power is political power, and capital will always have the power to undermine popular democracy. But I'm not talking from two sides of my mouth, supporting Bernie Sanders and also saying, having doubt about how viable it is, because winning government power and using it to break the dominance of the capitalist class, withstand the backlash from capitalist and conservative forces if it is backed up strongly and emphatically by a mass movement which shifts the balance of power away from capital towards labor. The progressive reforms of democratic socialism can only win with the consistent, ongoing, direct mass struggles in every community of our country. People's power will and can subvert the cold-blooded power of capital. Democratic socialism can only succeed if the people are constantly vigilant and participate in every level of decision-making. Grassroots advocacy groups in every state, every city, every region must mobilize to reach out, educate, and advocate. Unions, immigrant rights groups, LGBTQ groups, Black Lives Matter groups, progressive and leftist political groups, all must have the back of a democratic socialist government for it to succeed. Such a movement for real change has to begin at the local level and then build up to encompass the entire country. And in many ways, Cooperate Asbury, modeled after Cooperate Jackson, is a true-to-life experiment in people's power. An experiment in the power of grassroots activism at the local level to offer an alternative to the all-encompassing power of corporate capitalism. It is there, our mission, to build economic democracy by anchoring it in a network of cooperatives and other types of worker-owned and democratically managed enterprises. It is based on the premise of workers' democratic control over their workplaces at every level of design, production, and delivery of goods and services. It is a microcosm of a world where people don't try to control others for personal gain, but cooperate so that everyone can flourish. Socialism and the humanitarianism on which it is based is the path to a future of social justice and fairness, which also ensures the continuation of the Earth's ability to continuously nurture life for all our progeny yet to be born. If not revolutionary socialism, then democratic socialism is the one which holds the promise for an egalitarian and just future, but only if each person, inspired and buoyed by their own uncompromising democratic imperative, adds their voice to the struggles of workers in their communities and forms a formidable opposition to challenge continuously the power of private capital to subvert all hopes for the sake of private gain. Capitalism is fundamentally sociopathic, and it is up to each of us to foil its plans for destroying everything for its own private and short-term profit. It is up to us to stand with the visionaries of our day and fight, because all our futures and life depends on that. Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank you for recognizing Adam Smith. And not a whole lot of people in the world know who he is. I'm concerned about some of your examples. For example, your McDonald's workers who work for $57 for.
Yeah, that's why I gave everybody the numbers.
It's like they work for $50 to produce $3,000 income. However, you leave out the fact that they're not just standing there twiddling their thumbs. They're working with hamburgers, fries, machinery, fixtures, a building, all of which had to be provided for them to work in. And that $3,000 that they produce was not all profit for the capitalists. Only part of it was.
Machines, the place, all the fryers and the furniture, they are a one-time purchase.
Not necessarily. I disagree with that.
They are a one-time purchase. You might have to repair them, make improvements on them, but workers have to be paid every single month, every single week. The raw materials that you buy, you can buy them in bulk because of economies of scale. I mean, we know how much people buy from, Costco and all these other places, in which they are able to buy things at a very low price. So those things are something within the purview of the capitalists, plan. But the worker is somebody who he absolutely needs. But he can only pay a certain amount of money if he has to maximize his profit. Of course he needs money for all these other things. But the question is, couldn't he pay the worker a little bit more generously? Couldn't he pay?
Perhaps he could.
The money?
But, excuse me, that's not the failure of the system. That's the failure of the individual capitalist.
But it is something which you see everywhere.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about a nursing home.
And you see it because it's allowed by our government.
No, it is not. Of course it is allowed by our government, because governments have lost their spine, because they're completely in the pockets of the multinational corporations.
That's a whole other world.
Because they want money for their campaigns and all that stuff. So they really have to speak up. They have to they have to toe the line with the capitalist in mind. But I just want to talk about a nursing home. The nursing home aid even now, after all the struggles that they have gone through, they still make $11.75 an hour. In that hour, what is this nursing aide doing? Tell us.
Pretty much, you are pretty much taking care of about maybe 10 to 12 people, where you go in and you have to bathe them, you have to turn them over, you have to change them, and then a lot of the time, you're pretty much doing it by yourself, or you might be lucky enough to have 2 or 3 people out here.
And how much is the nursing home charging these 10 people that she's servicing every
I would
hour?
probably say if you're at a
Would you say a little bit more than $11.75?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And what is she unable to do? She probably, if she has a family, she probably still qualifies for food stamps. She probably still qualifies for Medicare because she's not making enough. That's all we ask. That's what all the living wage debate is all about. Pay them. Of course, take what you need to maintain your buildings and all that stuff, but pay the worker. The irony that your wealth is not, you can't produce that wealth without the worker. Show some gratitude. Pay them a wage which allows them to live, to take care of their families. But we are subsidizing the McDonald's or the Walmart when they go for food stamps or for TANF, for Medicaid. It's taxpayer money which is subsidizing the Walmarts and the McDonald's. Do you know McDonald's? I'm not forgetting you. Do you know McDonald's gave its workers a budget, a family budget, that this is how you should try and save money. But what is most critical about that budget is it also has provision for a second job. That all of this can be done only if you have a second job. And I always tell my students when I was teaching, please check every point I make. Go and look it up on your own. The McDonald's employee budget. See what it says.
Again,
Well, I think we're
We're
going
going to
to
move on
cut it
to
off.
the next person.
But I agree with.
Well, just real quick, that's Tracy.
Right now, the Democrat of the co-op, as you first said, Adam Smith's thought process was that there should be governance in the process of overseeing capitalism. And we have to, and right now, I don't think any process is perfect. When we look at what we're looking at, I worked in the public sector for 18 years. I worked for Continental Airlines. I worked for a division of Continental Airlines where there was a profit sharing program. You can work you work your full hours. If there's a profit in the company, the employees share in that profit. So you can make your salary, double your salary, without any overhead. Now the other side of the company was not making it because they had overcost, mismanagement, and all those other things. When we look at oversight, we have to look at oversight of the government overseeing what capitalism is doing. If they're making too much money and we're not satisfying a social agenda, then we might have to raise taxes. But we have to govern in the sense of community. It's like you said, it's local. And local means getting people to people that we elect to do what they're supposed to be doing. I'm grateful that I worked with Derek. We created the Affordable Housing Coalition.
Right.
So right now we feel that Asbury has to have affordable housing that it didn't provide. So we went to the city, which we're fighting, to get that. So all these agendas have to be community oriented, but the focus does not separate that. Capitalism does make an effort because if a person wants to own a boat, that is not an essential problem of someone's life, living in a boat or eating or anything else. Those other things should practically add an advantage. And if a person's competitive in their life and they want to do more, I don't think you should distract them from that opportunity, but that's something that the government is not going to pay for, that you just want to go on your boat and hang out in an ocean. So we have to level what our ask is and make sure we meet the needs of what we do. Cooperative Cooperative Asbury, that's what it's going to do. It's going to make everyone involved in making sure we create businesses that socially are connected to the community and things that we need and also have them out.
And you are going to hold the local government accountable.
So I appreciate you going through the journey of what capitalism is at its core up until when it's not working. What I heard was you really emphasizing the purpose of capitalism. The purpose of capitalism is to maximize profit. And it leads me to just sit and wonder, why is that purpose working for us? And it seems like it's not. So if that purpose, if the premise of capitalism isn't working for us as a species and a planet, why would we do anything other than change the premise?
Exactly.
And so, to the boat example, it makes me wonder, okay, if all the externalities of labor and environmental costs of the environment were factored in, is it even possible for someone to make a profit if the true cost of production was internalized? In which case, because that's the kind of capitalism, for me that's the conscious capitalism that I would stand for, but at that point, is it even capitalism if maybe that's a system where there is no profit? So I just wanted to...
Then it is a system which is, it has been humanized, and probably the humanization happened because of people's movement, because of political awareness, that an effort to hold it accountable and do the right thing in terms of, there have been examples of many companies, many corporations, and Stride Rite comes to mind. Do you know about Stride Rite? Stride Rite used to be the shoe company from which I always bought the shoes of my kids because they were supposed to be so good. And also the guy who ran the company in Boston, I think, he was really aware of the welfare of his people. Of course he made some money, but not such an exorbitant one that he wasn't.
Made it as a capitalist. It's not capitalism that's
She's
wrong.
talking right now. You
Can
want
I
an
finish what
opportunity to ask your question. Let's not interrupt the speaker, all right?
But he didn't make such an exorbitant profit that it took away the means of livelihood for his workers. So he was able to do that. But with globalization, he came to a position that he couldn't compete with all the other shoe companies because everybody else was outsourcing their stuff, elsewhere. And he essentially had to sell his company because he didn't want to sell his principles. So there is room for people who can work in a much more humane way.
I just read an article that I'm going to send to you about the 13 things that the public sector can do better than the marketplace, and it talks about infrastructure. But the two of the sentences that stuck out in my head were in the article were privatization of education. This is not exactly the quote, but it's close. Privatization of education won't work because the motives of privatization go against the motives of education. In that, the best way to make a lot of money in education, in delivering private education, is to deliver as little education as you can.
Exactly.
And the author made the same point, talking about healthcare. The best way to make money in healthcare delivery is to deliver as little healthcare as you possibly can. And his main point at the end of the article is the one that I'm actually picking up on, maybe I'm misinterpreting. But I think there's a faith, almost religious, about the market that's taken hold of the society more than at any time, maybe not at any time, still today, some other areas of history, times of history, but it certainly is a faith. And when you start talking the way you're talking, I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm just saying I think that the fear of you're cutting too many of the foundations under us, out from under us, to think that it's individual choices that run a thing that is so structurally found is again a thing that we believe. Everybody makes their individual choices and we all are free to do that. And that's just not the case. The structures of all kinds control what we do. And just one last thought. The other day, Sunday, and I don't know how good it's going to be, but there's an MSNBC series called Clean the Swamp, Clear the Swamp or something. A couple of journalists, MSNBC, talking to people about it, and there's one fellow on Wall Street telling Katie Tur, we don't want the government controlling these decisions. And I kept saying, Katie, ask him about how the corporations are controlling the choices that we have. I mean, this idea that the corporations don't ever control it, and the government's the one doing all the controlling, is such an article of faith, again. And that's what I'm saying. In general, I'm just saying, I think that's one of the challenges we have in talking about this, because we're scared. We scare people sometimes because we're going after something that they have been trained to believe is absolutely true. It can't be changed. It is not true.
I think at some point in my presentation I said that has been the way in which, the consciousness of the people have been completely monopolized to the rationale of the capitalist system and the market. So they haven't been able to really visualize envision any other manner, and they feel that they are completely lost.
Over here.
I think Sheila.
I was here.
Muata.
Okay.
All right. In line with that, see, people talk about maximum profit. How much profit does people really need taken up with what's going on? And also look at what she stated before, how this system was created. Capitalism in America was based on genocide and slavery that existed for over 200 plus years. So this profit that you talk about came about from that. The Industrial Revolution in this country came out of slavery. Every 80 cents or more of every dollar made during slavery formed the Industrial Revolution in this country. Understand the history of this country, how we got to where we got. And if you have the greatest propaganda machine to make people who are oppressed support the system that's oppressing us. Capitalism oppresses people. We understand there are good and bad capitalism. It's not about the individual. It's about the systems that created the thing, like I said, genocide, taking the native people's land, also slavery that had my people, my ancestors working for free for over 200 plus years. Understanding that, you understand how the system came about.
I think Teresa first.
I was going to piggyback on what this gentleman was saying, because unfortunately in our society we want to pigeonhole everything into little tiny squares and categories, and we want to put labels on everything, and it doesn't work that way, which is why everybody is this progressive, liberal this, liberal that, blah blah blah. That is the gist of the headache, part of it. In capitalism, we've gotten so crazy and extreme. Even in socialism, you can get so crazy and extreme. In communism, you can get so crazy and extreme. Marxism, get bizarre, crazy, and deranged. And in each of those systems, there are choices. The capitalists can make options of choices. That $7 an hour doesn't always have to be, and it always not is a $7 an hour. The nurse's aid cost. I've worked in institutions where the nurse's aides are making $20 an hour.
Can you please list
That's out of state. But that is the leader of the system's choice. So we have to be very careful. The nursing home operator, the McDonald's franchise operator, those are the choices made with individuals in the system. That's all I'm
Absolutely, choice,
yes,
but within the parameters of maximizing
And the
profit.
same in socialism.
No, there is no concept of profit in socialism.
I think this is a good place to jump in and jump off what you said. I think this is a good place to jump in and jump off what you said, and to use the McDonald's example. So if you look at those fryers that they bought, sure that the McDonald's paid a certain amount for those fryers, but even if there's a tag on them that says they were manufactured in the United States, a lot of the components may have come from other countries and cost those manufacturers basically nothing. Which connects it all to just exploited workers somewhere in the world.
And
Working for nothing, except for slavery.
And everything the McDonald's uses, from hamburgers to tomatoes to all these machines, has been made with the same principle of extracting as much as possible by giving next to nothing. You remember the tomato workers strike in Florida?
Has anybody who wanted to speak hasn't spoken yet?
Hi there.
I've known a few of these wealthy capitalists, and they lack empathy. I don't know, childhood, they're sort of children that just can't connect to people, and they're fearful of losing all their money. And they make this wall around the money, and they're afraid of losing it because it protects them from society. It's a sickness now. They don't care about people. They really, it's not good to have any feelings for people. So, I don't know, the computers enable a lot of this, the internet, and
But
concentration.
since Bill is saying that, I would like to talk about Bill Bar over there. Oh, there, right?
Yeah, right here.
That Bill and Bill Taylor over here, they are building a house with their own money to provide housing for the homeless. In Point Pleasant. I agree.
Are you guys taking donations, or is there anywhere we can?
Yeah, we have a website.
Okay, great.
And this is Pat Barr, my dear friend, who is, I'm sure, always there, part of the three. Part of the three who
Trying
are...
to set up their be like a minimal rent, so it's not like we would kind of go.
No, they're not going to, exactly.
We would help.
But when we talk about minimum rent, affordable rent, it has to be affordable. It can't be $500. Even that is not affordable.
But we're working with the vets, they might subsidize, like we'll charge 3 and they'll subsidize another 100. But, so it's a mixer. But just the computers enable all this, but computers also give power to all the people now. And I think that socializing networks and all the fundraising, there's going to be a whole wave of other power coming through the internet. I think it's just we haven't caught up to the capitalists that grab the internet first.
Well, you better. Facebook. Right here.
Well, there's a whole world.
Anything.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit more about, what Adam said, that certain things, cannot be privatized, right? Because it just costs too much money, right?
That's,
And-
on that page 62.
Right, and if you could, emphasize a little bit more, and especially today with the Medicare for all question, August 8th is going to be a meeting, I think, Medicare for
It's,
all.
right.
And, this is where a lot of discussions have to be because, these public things like either get bankrupt, like Amtrak, understand that, eventually they're looking at bankruptcy and the government's trying to save it, but all of this is, because they lack the profit. So, can you talk a little bit more about what is needed, like in our society, and maybe compare how they approach it in other societies, even though it's still capitalist, but...
Exactly, you talk about the social democracies of Europe. So many of the countries, they are able to provide some of those basic services. And people don't have to worry about not having a car or being late for their work or their doctor's appointment, because at least there is affordable transit, mass transit. They don't have to worry about falling sick because, everybody's money pays for socialized medicine which takes care of everybody. Medical care, which, like Bernie Sanders says, it is a human right, it's not a privilege. Everybody falls sick, and why should it be that some people are able to go to the doctor and get the best medical care, and so many others, 30 million at least, who have absolutely no kind of health insurance. In this situation, how are they going to be taking care of their medical needs? There are certain needs in society which need to be taken care of unconditionally. It is not conditional upon whether you have a job or not. It is not conditional upon whether you can pay for it or not. It is something which is there, and we can pay for it because we have this huge medical establishment. But it is, but every indices that you look at, infant mortality rate, we are far behind so many of the other countries. The lifespan is reducing. And in some areas, guess who is the most threatened? White middle-class men. They are the ones who are losing the most so far as their level of mortality is concerned. So, nobody is immune to falling sick. That's something which we are all going to, come across at some point or the other. Making healthcare a prerogative simply says that we are able to, make sure that everybody has access to it. We don't have to, nobody has to go bankrupt. Nobody has to be put outside their homes. I really would like Anna Marvel to talk about Medicare for All.
I don't have much time. I'm running for the debate, but we have an event coming up on August 8th. And it's a storytelling event that's going to also link in with some action planning for persuading Representative Frank Malone, who is not yet on board with Medicare for All, to actually sign on. So it is at the Long Branch Library at 6 o'clock, and anyone who has a healthcare story that wants to share is welcome to come. We will probably live stream it and broadcast it nationally via our Revolution Facebook page. And it's also a great opportunity to make a plan with us about how to persuade a powerful Democrat who is not yet on board with this program to actually sponsor it and allow for hearings. So Medicare for All is a widely popular idea, as you know. I'm sure it's a central topic of the debates tonight. I'm really confident that Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are going to do a lot of damage control in terms of all the misinformation that's out there regarding Medicare for All. Medicare for All is insurance. It's not taking away your insurance. It's actually expanding your options for doctors and for your care. And also regarding the taxes that Biden is so worried about, how we pay for it, all these essential questions I'm hoping that are going to be addressed tonight in a way that's going to move the conversation forward. But it's so important that we, all of us, as grassroots supporters of this idea, come forward with our stories, our personal stories, and our experiences about the medical system, because these stories are the ones that are going to move the public opinion in one direction or another. And if we are silent about our struggles with the insurance companies, they're going to win. So I invite everyone to come. I think my colleague has some flyers. And this is an ongoing movement. So we are still at the very beginning in terms of moving the congressman, but we are going to keep putting up events such as this one and others. And also, our revolution is a great group. I will check yours out. You are all welcome to our monthly meetings. We are a progressive organization that's working towards Medicare for All, the Green New Deal, minimum wage, against wealth and income inequality, and we have great committees and a great group. Some of the members are here.
Question, yes, Franco, you mean the reason as to why he's not supporting?
He has given excuses as to why he has not signed on. His excuses are mostly related to his donors, I believe. He's always saying that we need to be pragmatic about healthcare and we need to compromise about healthcare. And this is just not a topic that you really have a middle ground on, right? Because it's our health. Like, how long are you going to compromise? It's long overdue that we reform our healthcare system in the country. And right now we have some power in our hands. So the question is, how are we using our power when we have it? I mean, we have these powerful Democrats who, we have a couple in the House of Representatives now, who are not using their power towards the common good. They're using their power to satisfy their donors. So basically, that's the issue at hand that we are dealing with.
And then, just to kind of plug it into Co-op Asbury, kind of hearing what everyone's saying, I think, in Co-op Asbury, we really look at not only economics, but also how economics is connected to power. So, for instance, I think in the 50s and 60s, a typical CEO made 20 times the amount of a working class person. Now the typical CEO makes about 361 times that of a typical person. So we really kind of want to look at these things. We want to look at the 8 people control half the world's wealth, that 1% of the world controls 70% of the wealth. Is this the world that we want to live in? That in Asbury Park we have 31% of our population in Asbury Park is under the poverty level, which is like 18 or 19,000. And then 20% more is only a few thousand over that. So over 50% of this town is living close or under the poverty level. So we really want to talk about that, right? What does that look like? And is that because some people have so much and other people don't? Absolutely. And so I think one of a philosopher that sort of inspired Co-op Asbury was a French philosopher named Proudhon, but he said property is theft. So he didn't necessarily mean you couldn't own your house.
Right.
But what he did mean...
Or your boat, for that matter.
But what he did mean is if you have a house that you're not using and living in, that's actually a crime to the community. If we have 600,000 people in the United States experiencing homelessness, which we do, it's a crime to have 2 or 3 houses and not offer it to the people that have no place to go. And I think when we really look at power, I mean, who here loves having a boss? Literally not one person likes having a boss. So the other question is, why do we put up with it? Because everyone in this room, we could all put our heads, money, capital together, and we create a workers' institution that's controlled by us. And that's what we're kind of talking about. So I hope you signed up. But we want to believe that if no one of us likes a boss, and a lot of us who don't like bosses ended up becoming our own boss. We didn't want a boss. But not everyone has that privilege, right? So what Cooperate Asbury really is sharing power horizontally. Sharing property horizontally. So we want to get land trusts and have community housing and community-controlled housing, co-op housing, co-op businesses, but also institutions where we can make the decisions, the people most directly can make decisions. And contrary to what people think about socialism, socialism can kind of be seen as everybody makes the same, and certain communist governments have done that, where they kind of control how much people make. But I think Co-op Asbury believes some people can make more and some people can make less, but it's the worker's decision to make that. For instance, they're like, we recognize that you're working a lot harder. Or what, we really honor that extra wisdom experience you have. I think you should make a little more.
Or you just have a newborn.
Yeah.
You just need more.
But what does democracy look like? When I say democracy, I mean a Greek essence of democracy, meaning everyone has the ability to decide. So that's what Co-op Asbury is about. It is starting at the grassroots level, but what is also exciting is we are connected on an international level of something called municipalism, communalism, of people practicing these things in Spain, and Syria, and Mexico, and Jackson. All over the world, people are practicing things like this. So there is a larger movement of direct democracy. So yeah, please email us. Come to this next event, September 4th. It's about starting a cooperative. But really, for this to work, we need more people to participate and do this. So please join, get involved. Again, thanks to Words. I know not everyone has money, but if you do, there's books, there's used books here. Support Words, maybe not today, but later. Tell your friends not to shop at Amazon, shop here.
Yes, absolutely.
And listen, I mean, boycott Amazon by every possible means, because Amazon is putting people out of business. They are, in every possible way, they are an abomination. So, of course, it is convenient, but convenience is not justice. It's not fair.
Yeah. So huge thanks to Rumu, Dr. Rumu DasGupta. We all got to sit in on a seminar that people pay a lot of money for, so we are feeling very thankful for your sharing of that knowledge. We are all welcome to hang out and mingle. I hope Rumu will stay. Maybe other folks want to talk to you. Or
yeah, but I want to introduce Chris Wire over here. He wants to be the web guy for Co-op Asbury.
If you need help, I'm a developer. I have a 20-year history of working with nonprofit organizations in New York City, the Bank area. And if you need
So-
rep help with marketing,
Yes.
design.
Yes, we need to tell them because
Yes.
right now we have a Facebook page. Let people know we have a Cooperative Asbury's Facebook page. Check it out. It's easy to talk with.
You have
We just have a Facebook page right now. But go on the website. We definitely need to talk.
And this is his son, who is so wonderful. He comes.
There's a lot of organizations represented here, so I hope people do stay and mingle, and you want to get into
No, I
the last
just wanted to say that it's so beautiful to actually have